There's some things I really can't stand.
Like what?
Well, I don't like rap, because the voice is always the same.
Morrissey once called a certain mega-famous band the most overrated group in the history of popular music.
I've had very few experiences, but they have been bad, yes, and they were a very long time ago. And it's not something that I would like to...
He said another beloved British act was absolutely dreadful and couldn't understand why anyone liked them. The King of Misery didn't just hate these bands, he absolutely destroyed them with words that made headlines and started feuds lasting decades. The Pope of Mope never held back. While other musicians played it safe with boring diplomatic answers, Stephen Patrick went straight for the throat.
So please, 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 let me.
He destroyed careers with single sentences, started wars that are still going on today, and somehow made being mean into an art form. From pop princesses to indie darlings, from his Manchester neighbors to international superstars, nobody was safe from Morrissey's savage tongue. Some of these feuds got so nasty that bands actually fired back, creating some of the most entertaining drama in music history. Today, we're counting down the top 6 bands that Morrissey absolutely couldn't stand. We've got Manchester band wars, bitter rivalries with pop superstars, and even beef with other sad boys of the 80s. Wait until you hear what he said about that massive Britpop band from his own hometown. It's brutal. The drama we're about to uncover will shock you. These aren't just casual dislikes or professional disagreements. These are full-blown musical wars that divided fans and rocked the entire industry. 6. Duran Duran. Coming in at number 6, we have Duran Duran, and let me tell you, Morrissey had zero time for these pretty boys from Birmingham. While the rest of the world was going crazy for Hungry Like the Wolf and swooning over Simon Le Bon's cheekbones, our man Morrissey was having absolutely none of it. Back in the early 80s, when Duran Duran were ruling the charts with their flashy videos and expensive suits, Morrissey saw them as everything wrong with pop music.
And I feel that if I can like at least half an album, well, for me personally, that's really quite revolutionary.
Which bits?
He famously called them the acceptable face of fascism. Yeah, he really went there. This wasn't just some random insult either. Morrissey genuinely believed these guys represented the shallow, image-obsessed side of music that he absolutely despised. The beef went deeper than just their look, though. While Morrissey was writing songs about loneliness and social outcasts, Duran Duran were making videos on luxury yachts with supermodels. It was like they were living in completely different worlds. Morrissey once said in an interview that Duran Duran made him physically sick, and that their success proved how stupid the music industry had become. But here's the crazy part. Both bands were huge in the same era. While Duran Duran were selling millions of records worldwide, the Smiths were building this incredible cult following. It was like watching two completely different versions of what British music could be. The funniest thing is that years later, some critics actually agreed with Morrissey. They said Duran Duran's success was more about marketing than actual musical talent. But back then, calling out the biggest band in the world took some serious guts. That's just how Morrissey rolled. He never cared about making enemies. 5. Wham. At number 5, we've got Wham. And honestly, this one makes perfect sense when you think about it.
I don't know what the hell you want from me, oh.
George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley were everything Morrissey wasn't. Happy, commercial, and making music that actually made people want to dance. Can you imagine Morrissey's face when Wake Me Up Before You Go Go came on the radio? Morrissey absolutely destroyed Wham in multiple interviews, calling them the most ridiculous pop group he'd ever seen.
Well, I think it's perhaps the most least attractive track. I don't know, I can't explain it. It just didn't really strike me that much.
He said their music was an insult to intelligence and couldn't understand how anyone over the age of 12 could take them seriously. But the real kicker? He once said that Wham represented everything that's wrong with modern Britain. Talk about taking it personally. The thing is, while Wham were selling millions of records and making teenage girls scream, Morrissey was over there writing songs about wanting to die. It was like watching a battle between pure joy and complete despair. George Michael was out there singing about having fun, while Morrissey was convinced that life was basically pointless. What made this feud even more intense was the timing. Both acts were huge in the mid-'80s, and they couldn't have been more different. Wham had those colorful outfits, synchronized dancing, and songs about partying. Meanwhile, Morrissey was wearing flowers in his back pocket and singing about how miserable everything was. The crazy part is that both George Michael and Morrissey were actually incredibly talented songwriters. But Morrissey saw Wham's success as proof that the music industry cared more about image than substance. He wasn't completely wrong either. Wham were definitely more about the total package than just the music. Number 4, Madonna. Number 4 is going to blow your mind because it's Madonna. And the drama between these two was absolutely legendary. Madonna was the undisputed queen of pop. But Morrissey? He thought she was basically everything wrong with celebrity culture rolled into one person. Morrissey once said that Madonna was the closest thing to organized prostitution he'd ever seen in the music industry.
Female pop icon, if you like. I mean, what could follow Madonna in that sense?
Yeah, he really said that. He claimed she had no real talent and was just selling sex to make money. This was during the height of Madonna's fame, when she was literally the biggest star on the planet, so imagine how that went down. But here's where it gets really interesting. Morrissey's problem with Madonna wasn't just about her music. He saw her as this manufactured pop star who was more interested in shocking people than actually creating art.
That Madonna actually cares about climate change.
While Madonna was pushing boundaries with videos like a Prayer, Morrissey was sitting there thinking it was all just cheap attention-seeking. The feud got even more personal when Madonna started dating different celebrities. Morrissey made several comments about how she collected famous men like trophies and said her relationships were just publicity stunts. He genuinely believed that everything about Madonna was fake, from her accent changes to her spiritual phases. What's wild is that both artists were actually quite similar in some ways. They were both control freaks who wrote their own material and had very strong opinions about everything. But where Madonna embraced controversy and fame, Morrissey acted like he was above it all. The irony is that Morrissey talking about Madonna probably got him more press than some of his actual songs. The most savage thing? Morrissey once said that Madonna's music made him embarrassed to be human. That's not just criticism. That's complete annihilation. 3. The Cure. Coming in at number 3, we have The Cure, and this one is absolutely wild because you'd think these two would be best friends. Both bands were masters of melancholy, both had lead singers who looked like they'd never seen sunlight, and both made music for people who felt like outsiders. But apparently, there wasn't room for two sad boys in British music. The beef between Morrissey and Robert Smith was legendary in the alternative music world. Morrissey once called The Cure a parody of depression and said that Robert Smith was just putting on an act with all his makeup and gloomy songs. This was coming from a guy who literally made a career out of being miserable. But Robert Smith wasn't having any of it. He fired back by saying that Morrissey was pretentious and that the Smiths were boring. He also said that Morrissey's whole personality was fake and that he was just trying too hard to be interesting. Talk about a war of words between two of the most depressing musicians ever. The really crazy part is that both bands had huge followings, and fans were basically forced to pick sides. You were either a Smiths person or a Cure person. There was no in-between. Music magazines loved this drama because it sold copies, and both singers kept giving them more material to work with. What made this feud so intense was that they were basically competing for the same audience. Teenagers who felt misunderstood and different were listening to both bands, but apparently Morrissey thought The Cure were stealing his thunder. He once said that Robert Smith was commercializing sadness and making depression trendy. The funniest thing about this whole feud? Years later, both bands are now considered legends, and most people listen to both of them. But back in the day, this was serious business. Number 2, we have Blur. And this feud was absolutely brutal because it was basically a generational war. When Britpop exploded in the 90s, Blur were leading the charge with hits like Song 2 and Park Life. But Morrissey? He thought they were just copying what the Smiths had already done. except badly. Morrissey completely destroyed Blur in interviews, calling them derivative and saying they had no original ideas. He claimed that Damon Albarn was just trying to be him, but without any of the talent or intelligence. The most savage quote? Morrissey said that Blur were what happens when mediocre people try to make important music. But Damon Albarn wasn't going to take this lying down. He fired back by saying that Morrissey was a bitter old man who couldn't handle that music had moved on without him. Albarn also said that the Smiths were overrated and that people only liked them because of nostalgia. This was like declaring war on an entire generation of indie music fans. The really crazy part was that Blur were actually influenced by the Smiths. They'd said so in early interviews. But when they became successful, Morrissey saw it as theft rather than tribute. He once said that watching Blur's success was like seeing your children grow up to disappoint you. What made this feud even more intense was the media coverage. Music magazines were constantly asking both sides for comments, and every interview became another opportunity for insults. Morrissey would say something dismissive about modern music, and Blur would respond by calling him irrelevant. The timing was perfect for drama too. This was during the height of Britpop, when British music was having its biggest moment since the 60s. But instead of celebrating, we had this bitter war between the old guard and the new generation. Morrissey genuinely believed that bands like Blur were ruining everything the Smiths had worked for. 1. Oasis. And here we are at number 1, Oasis. This is the ultimate feud because both Morrissey and Oasis are from Manchester.
You've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe.
Which made this feel like a family fight that got completely out of control.
I had a night out with Morrissey once in LA. It was one of the funniest nights I've ever had with anyone.
Was it?
When Oasis exploded onto the scene in the mid-90s, they were the biggest band in Britain. But Morrissey thought they were just loud, obnoxious, and completely talentless. The Gallagher brothers, especially Liam, were never ones to back down from a fight. When Morrissey called Oasis the most overrated band in the history of popular music, Liam Gallagher responded by saying that Morrissey was a has-been, and that the Smiths were boring music for boring people. This was basically a declaration of war in Manchester, but the insults didn't stop there. Morrissey said that Oasis had single-handedly destroyed Manchester's musical reputation and that they were an embarrassment to the city. He claimed that their success proved that people had no taste and that loud guitars could cover up terrible songwriting. These weren't just casual comments. Morrissey was genuinely angry about what Oasis represented. Liam Gallagher kept firing back, calling Morrissey pretentious and saying that nobody cared about the Smiths anymore. He once said that Morrissey was jealous because Oasis were selling more records than the Smiths ever did. Noel Gallagher joined in too, saying that Morrissey's solo career proved he was nothing without Johnny Marr. The crazy thing is that this feud divided Manchester music fans like nothing before. You had people who grew up with the Smiths feeling like their city had been taken over by these loud, cocky newcomers. Meanwhile, younger fans thought Morrissey was just a bitter old man who couldn't handle not being the most famous person from Manchester anymore. This feud lasted for decades, and honestly, it's probably still going on today. Every few years, someone from either camp makes a comment, and the whole thing starts up again. It's the gift that keeps on giving for music journalists. So there you have it, Morrissey's most hated bands. Which feud shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this drama-filled countdown, smash that like button and subscribe for more music feuds and scandals.